to be talking about my experience with psychosis. Psychosis can be a coping mechanism to manage stress. Psychosis can happen when the psyche fragments to protect the ego, and the mind retreats from the external dimension into a more symbolic, internal subconscious dimension. As long as I can remember, I've experienced psychosis. I experienced a lot of instability and lack of safety early on in life. I was in a very big earthquake. When the earthquake happened, I was 2 and I didn't know what earthquakes were yet. I looked on the wall and I saw a giant shadow, and I thought that the shadow was a monster and that it had hold of the house and was shaking it. After that experience, I became very afraid of shadows, and I thought that shadows were monsters. From when I was about 3 onwards, I remember seeing shadow people in my room. So shadow people, they basically look like a shadow in the outline of a human, and I would see them standing in my room when I was in bed trying to fall asleep. I would see them standing in the corners of my room, at the foot of my bed, walking around in the room. And I would also see them walking up and down the hallway outside my bedroom door. I was really scared of the shadow people, and I was afraid that they wanted to hurt me and my family. I would also hallucinate zombies coming up out of the floor, rising up through the floor. So as just a little kid, I would lay in bed trying to fall asleep, just being terrified, seeing these shadow people and these zombies in my room. I saw a lot of really scary hallucinations, and I grew up feeling a lot of fear. I grew up thinking that I was haunted by an external spirit realm, because I was seeing these shadow people and zombies and these creatures that came out of ghost stories. Growing up dealing with psychosis made me feel just really scared all of the time. Hallucinations and delusions can serve to protect parts of the psyche. For example, they can deliberately scare you to compel a retreat from reality into the relative safety of the subconscious. There can also be comforting hallucinations. I still didn't fully realize that I was dealing with psychosis. I thought that I was dealing with being haunted by a spirit realm, and then a lot of the hallucinations and delusions that I couldn't explain that way, I either just thought were true or came up with other random explanations to try to justify what I was experiencing. I developed OCD rituals in an attempt to control and ward off these hallucinations. For example, I had one OCD ritual where I would have to say down 3 times in a row as an attempt to keep the zombies from rising up through my floor. When I was around 5 or so and started having dissociative seizures, I would experience dissociative non-epileptic seizures. I would wake up in the middle of the night, wake up out of sleep having a seizure, and it was like a tonic seizure, so all of my muscles all along my back would tense up and just become as tense as they could possibly be, and my back would be arched backwards. It would be really painful. I developed the delusion that it was being caused by the shadow people. I thought that the shadow people were coming up to me and stabbing me in the back with a knife and twisting the knife, because that's what the seizures felt like. I knew I saw the shadow people in my room and I was scared of them, and then I was experiencing this strange sensation and pain in my back, and so I just connected them in my mind. I didn't feel able to reach out or explain any of this, so I didn't get any help with it. So growing up, when I didn't really have support about it, I would deal with psychosis by doing artwork. I would make artwork and drawings depicting some of my Hallucinations, and I would write about my hallucinations and delusions, and in this way I was able to use artwork to help cope with it on my own and to process the experiences in a safe way. I also had other delusions during this time, including the fear that my parents were actually spies, that they were somehow secret government workers that I couldn't trust. I also started having some other weird thoughts, like thinking that people could read my thoughts through my eyes. I also started having really strong delusions that the world was somehow ending, and that there would be a big catastrophic sudden event that would change the world as I knew it. When I was around 14 or so, I began to have delusions where I would worry about government plans, along with more specific fears about the end of the world and how that might happen. I did have some nice, comforting hallucinations too. For example, I would see animals that were like white and kind of misty. I would also see strange things, like in the middle of summer, in the heat, I would see just one tree outside that was completely frozen and covered in icicles. I didn't know these were hallucinations, so I was just really mystified by seeing things like one frozen tree in the middle of the summer. I also had experiences where I felt like birds were telepathically communicating with me, and they would swoop down and sit next to me or come over to me and start talking to me from their mind into my mind, and they would give me helpful advice and support. I also had some hallucinations where I would just see plants, so that was actually pretty nice. I would see a big sage bush in the middle of the car, or something like that. So while I did have a lot of scary hallucinations and delusions, I did also have nice and comforting ones. When I got a little older, I started seeing the zombies in other places too. For example, when I was going to school, I would be looking around at the cars driving around me, and I would see zombies inside the other cars on the road. I didn't realize I was hallucinating at this point still, so I tried to come up with reasons for why I would be seeing zombies in cars. I thought that maybe all these people were driving to a movie set or something, and they had props in the car with them. I would also see things moving in the mirror, but they wouldn't be moving outside the mirror. The psychosis got really bad. I would have times where I felt like there were demons in the fabric of the air all around me. Like the air was this sort of fabric made up of demons, and they were surrounding me and I couldn't get away from them. I started sleeping with a weapon for fear that people were going to break into my house while I was sleeping and try to hurt me. Then when I was 15, my cognitive issues became pretty severe. I started not being able to focus in class, and It felt like I just became unable to think. I couldn't think clearly. My reading comprehension got way worse. I stopped being able to memorize anything, and this affected schoolwork a lot. I had started going to therapy by this time, and I started taking antipsychotic medication, and I tried many kinds, but none of them ever helped me. At one point, I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and there was a shadow person sitting in the corner of my room, huddled in a ball, and they were talking to me. I had been talking to them in my dream, and when I woke up, I was still talking with them, and I was speaking out loud. I was dealing with grief at that point because a neighbor of mine who had been a very kind, loving presence to me, and who I saw sort of like a mother figure, this neighbor had died recently, and I was dealing with that grief. This shadow person in the corner of my room came to me and told me that they were that neighbor who had died, and I didn't believe them, and I felt really creeped out. But at the same time, I was so lonely and so desperate for somebody to talk to, I kept talking with the shadow person in my dark bedroom. Even though I didn't believe them, I kept talking to them anyway because I was just that lonely. This is one way that the subconscious helps try to cope with psychosis. This hallucination was trying to help me process my grief over the death of this neighbor who I cared about. After I turned 18 and went off to college, my psychosis got worse. I continued to really struggle with thinking that people could read my thoughts through my eyes, and I was afraid to make eye contact with anybody because I didn't want to let them read my thoughts and learn all my secrets. When I would go outside, I would be really afraid of this, so I started not leaving my apartment and just trying to stay inside and avoid people as much as possible. When I would go outside, I felt that other people were talking about me and laughing about me. When I heard people talking and laughing, I automatically assumed it had to do with me. I remember one really elaborate hallucination that I had. I was in an underground metro station. I was going to ride the metro home after work. As I was walking down the staircase to go underground into the metro, there was a man walking up the staircase on the other side from me. When he passed right beside me going down and him going up, he stopped and everything froze, and he turned to look at me. He looked me right in the eyes and he said, "Do you see? Do you understand?" I was really confused by his question, and I looked away and continued to walk down the staircase. And when I got to the bottom of the staircase, every single person on the platform was frozen with their faces turned, looking at me. And all of them, every single person in unison, started saying, "What? What?" Just repeating that, sort of in response to what the first person had asked me. And it wasn't until everybody on the platform turned in unison to look at me that I realized I was hallucinating, because I realized that it would have been impossible for everybody to be so synchronized if it wasn't a hallucination. Using deduction methods like that to tell if what you're experiencing is a hallucination or a delusion is known as reality testing. So experiences like this made me just really scared to go outside and leave my house and be around people, because I got to the point where I wasn't sure what was true and what wasn't, and what was really happening with other people and what wasn't. I knew that I had psychosis at that point. I was aware that I was hallucinating sometimes, but I still wasn't very good at reality testing. I had a lot of delusions about the end of the world. I would hallucinate that black cars were following me, black SUVs, and I would see them following me outside on the street. But there were times when I would completely hallucinate a car out of nowhere, and I would see a car following me and moving, only to realize a moment later that it hadn't been moving or following me and that I had hallucinated that happening. Delusions of a government conspiracy against me involving my parents. And I thought that I was being targeted and followed and persecuted. I still continued to see shadow people and to see zombies. I would see zombies walking around outside. Sometimes I would pass a person or a group of people and I would see them all as zombies instead of as people. So this was obviously really scary and made me want to avoid people. I would also have some other visual hallucinations, which were sort of like visual distortions. I would see what looked like a glitch, like an electronic glitch in the air. See what looked like lines from a VHS tape, and this would make me worry about the world being a simulation. Thankfully, when I was 21, I was able to go to a really good treatment center for eating disorders and trauma. And there I shared with my therapist about my experiences with hallucinations. And I also shared some delusions that I was not aware at the time were delusions. I thought that they were real. Thankfully, my therapist understood about psychosis and was able to help me understand what was going on and also help me learn to deal with it. Getting therapy really helped, and being able to talk with a therapist that understands about psychosis. Increasing my sense of safety and stability really helped a lot to cope with psychosis, because this meant that my psyche didn't have to be as reliant on maladaptive coping skills, such as the psychosis. Instead of ignoring hallucinations or delusions, I've found it very helpful to actually acknowledge them. It can be helpful to be curious about symptoms of psychosis instead of being afraid, to be open to understanding what information is being communicated from the subconscious. This can help you learn more about yourself and how to better take care of yourself. Psychosis can get better over time. I've definitely seen that in myself, and my psychosis is far better now than it was in the past. Nowadays, I only deal with hallucinations periodically, and I deal with far less delusions than before. For some people, elements of psychosis may remain even after treatment. But even if an issue still remains, you can always get better at coping with that issue. You can always get better at learning how to deal with experiences such as psychosis. So in that way, things can always get better.